you know you need a strong core. Whether you're trying to eliminate or prevent back pain, or you understand that the core is the center of everything that you do. If you don't have a strong core, something could go wrong in your back or somewhere else in the body. So core training is important, but it is so much more than just sit-ups. Your core training needs to address all of the movements that your core makes. So let's talk about those movements, and I'll give you exercise examples for each of those movements. So the movements are flexion. So flexion is rounding the spine. That's spinal flexion. Spinal extension is the opposite. So think of lifting the heart or opening up the front body, squeezing the back body. The next movement is lateral flexion. So that's that side bending movement where you're contracting one side and stretching the opposite side. And then the last movement that we're going to talk about is rotation. So this is any kind of twist. Any kind of twist is spinal rotation. So let's look at some example exercises for each of these moves. First one is flexion, so that one you probably know. Anything where you're flexing the spine. So think of a sit-up or a crunch. So crunching is flexing the spine. And even when you sit up, you're flexing the spine. So you're not coming up with a flat back. Another option, if you're not already doing it, is a reverse crunch. So put something behind your knees like a core ball or a yoga block. Keep your head and your hands flat on the floor. And then start with that little motion of just lifting the hips off the floor. And then if you can, just bringing those knees all the way over to the forehead. Always keep your gaze up at the ceiling when you're doing this exercise, rolling down slowly without your head popping off the mat. So this is also spinal flexion. And then the next one is the opposite of that, spinal extension. The best way to work that is with a cobra. So when you come down onto the mat, belly side down, feet about hip distance apart. Keep the tops of the feet pressing into the floor. And then we have different options for where we want to put the arms or the hands. So if you bring those arms back by your sides, it's a little bit gentler. Keep that chin tucked, pubic bone pressing into the ground, lifting and lowering. If you start to move the hands up, like maybe they're coming out to a T, or fingertips behind your ears, goalpost arms, all that gets harder, even reaching those arms overhead in a Y shape. So that longer lever is more work. And whenever you are done some extension like cobra, I like to stretch it out. So coming into that child's pose or cat stretch, flexing the spine. And then the next movement is lateral flexion. So a couple ways we can do that. Coming down into a side plank, so bringing your elbow to the ground, bottom leg bent to make it easier, top leg is straight, and if you want to make it harder, both legs straight with your top foot crossed in front. So you're dipping your hip and lifting, so this is lateral flexion through the side of the waist. So you're really pulling up and in with those obliques. Another option if side plank isn't for you, so you can do an oblique crunch. So get that core ball, press it up against your hip, and then as you come over it, bottom leg bent, top leg straight, hands behind the head, and then you're crunching the obliques on the top side. So this is a great option for lateral flexion, working those obliques. And the other movement that the obliques do, the last one we'll look at, is rotation. So any kind of twist. If you have a weight or anything else you want to hold on to, you could do some seated abdominal twists, keeping that spine nice and long as you lean back, rotating from side to side. Or the crisscross or the bicycle. So coming down onto your back, twisting, rotating through the midline of the body. So not just bringing your elbow over, but trying to get that shoulder towards the knee. Alternating sides, moving slowly, focusing on that feeling of bringing rib over to opposite hip. And that is your 4 core movements you want to make sure you have in your training. So some kind of flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. So there's lots of different exercises you could do. Those are just some examples to get you thinking. If you have questions, post them in the comments below.